This is the I Read Comic Books podcast, the very best podcast for regular comic book fans. I'm your host, Mike Rapin, and joining me this week, one other token man and one woman. This week, I am joined by Paul Jaisley.
Hello, humanoids.
And Kara Shimborski.
What's up?
Thank you both for joining me this week. I'm very excited to talk about comic books with the both of you because today we are talking about our Goodreads theme of the month, which is We Know Men Make Comic Books. So let's talk about comics made by women. We picked this because it is March. It is International Women's Month. And so we're going to be talking about comic books written by women. But before we get into that, I guess I have to ask, I have two things I need to talk about, I guess, really quick. One, our zine got funded. Insane. I mean, like, we finished recording on Sunday. I woke up on Monday. We were funded in the middle of the day. I basically had to, like, stop all work. I told everybody I was taking an extra long lunch so I could celebrate and dance around my house and write an update. And we also got confirmation that Jesse Lonergan is going to be doing a page in the zine as well. So now we have 25 pages by 21 artists, equaling 28 pages still. I think we're still going to keep it under 28 pages, but still, it's incredible. We've got an amazing list of creators in this book. If you haven't checked it out, please go to ircb.fyi/zine. We are funding through, or trying to get our Kickstarter funded, I guess, through the end of the month. Hopefully we can hit like 100 backers. That would be crazy to me if we got 100 people supporting this thing. People are getting tapes. So many people are getting tapes. I can't believe it. I ordered tapes from Canada when I saw the funding was successful, just because special company up in Canada. I was like, oh, I got to get these now before who knows what happens. And so they're on their way right now to me, shipping from Toronto, I think, which is very exciting. So I can't believe it. It's very, it's so exciting that this thing is actually happening. Honestly, it is. It's like I spent 3 months thinking about the zine, and then we launched it, and there was a week of just like, I don't know if this is going to happen. And then the first day we were blown away with the amount of support. And then we got over the finish line in a week. Like, that's crazy to me. And I just, like, I'm so thankful to all of you listening who have supported this thing. And if you're a new listener, welcome. We're so excited to have you. I know there's a lot of people that I know who supported this thing. And then there's a whole cadre of folks that I'm like, I don't even know who you are. Thank you for looking at this thing. Thank you for supporting us. If you're listening to the show, we cannot express how thankful you are, or thankful we are for all of this. I'm so pumped to get these pages in your hands. I've seen every single one of them at this point, including the page that's not on the Kickstarter yet. We're working on some final touches. It's so good. It's so fantastic. So I'm really pumped to get everybody's eyes on this. And I'm going to share that last page with the rest of the IRCB folks. You guys have seen it as well. I've sent all the pages to you. Thoughts before we dig into talking about comic books? I don't know. Please tell me you're also excited, please.
Every single piece of art Mike shares with us, I'm like, put it on a t-shirt. So maybe a stretch goal. Let's see what happens.
It could be fun.
It's all incredible stuff, and it's also unique and different. You know, it's something for everybody in there. So
right, including one magical page by the one and only Paul Jaisley is in this.
What?
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool page, I'll say. I was showing your page to Kyle, who's also in the zine, Kyle Rose, who did the front cover and stuff, and he just was like, I don't know how Paul puts these collages together in such a way that just like clicks. So like, Paul, you've got some talent there, man. That's all I'm saying. It's
well,
like
thank you.
Some random guy that I know thinks your shit is really, really good. I'll just say that.
That means a lot. Thank you, Kyle.
Yeah. But anyways, we are here to talk about comic books as we usually do on the show. So I have this legally mandated question that I have to ask, and that is, how have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, Paul.
Ooh,
Mike,
wait,
I've been doing.
Can I interrupt, Paul?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Let me interrupt Paul as let me interrupt Paul as the lady on the show for the Women's Month show.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm in charge, really. Paul, how have you been? How have comic books been? And why do you feel qualified as a man to talk about women in comics?
Oh no! Oh man. You know, Kara, that's something I was thinking about. Because I was looking at the books I had to read for this month, or what I had on my stack, and there wasn't a lot to pick from. I was like, man, I have to buy more comics by women in general, or something different, or something else that maybe I don't normally read. And, you know, I think that speaks to even someone like me who reads a lot of different comics. Like, you know, the amount of comics I buy every week when I go to the shop, the amount of women creators is relatively small. And I think that's, you know, an issue that needs to be talked about. So I think me as a comic book fan who wants to see the art form grow and succeed, it behooves me and us as a show to talk about these issues and to highlight books by women. So
beautiful.
Thank you.
Approved by women. Check.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you.
You've been given permission. So
Paul
continue.
can hang. Paul can be part of Galentine's Day.
I sure hope so. That means a lot. No, it's funny. There was a book on my to read pile that's been sitting there for months. I was like, oh, perfect. This is a great opportunity to finally get around to that book. And that is the book Roaming, the OGN by Jillian Tamaki and her cousin Mariko Tamaki. Amazing creative team. I mean, I'm sure most people kind of who read a lot of comics familiar with their work. They did This One Summer a couple years ago, which is an amazing young adult novel. I read that and really enjoyed it. Roaming came out a couple years ago. It ended up winning the Eisner, I believe, or it got a bunch of, awards and was celebrated. So I ended up buying a copy, and again, I've been sitting on my shelf for a while, and I finally sat down and read it over the weekend. And it was great. It's a truly fantastic story. If you liked This One Summer, which is very much a, young teenage coming of age story, this feels like the slightly older sister version of that, where it's like these women are in they're 19, 20, they're in college. The main characters are this high school best friends, Danny and her friend Zoe. They grew up together, but now they're going to different colleges. They don't see each other. They meet in New York for like a short, 4 or 5 day trip visit to New York City. And Danny brings along one of her classmates, this woman named Fiona, and this third person adds a dynamic to the group that kind of like tests the friendship between Danny and Zoe. And the way it all plays out, what I love is at the end of the book, they have the sort of credits at the end, and there's a quote from Julian and Mariko that just says, "The events of this story are both too real and entirely fictional." Because if you were ever 19 and had a friendship fall apart, or if you were when you went off to college, it's the characterization and the story is so heartfelt and well grounded and feels real, And part of that is because there's a sort of a slight physical romance that happens between Zoe and Fiona. That way that plays out, that dynamic just feels so natural and organic and done in a way that's not forced to make dramatic tension. That's something that would happen to somebody that age. And I think that's what I appreciate about the book. It does feel very lived in and familiar. Look, I'm 42 years old. I was never a 19-year-old girl. I did live in New York for a while. So, that part was kind of touched me, but just like the experiences that they are having are so heartfelt and genuine that even if you didn't experience them, you kind of like recognize what those emotions are. Does that make sense?
Empathy, Paul. That's empathy.
Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. And on top of it, the background of them going to New York, it's really interesting because the way that New York is illustrated is just, it feels very real. You can tell Jillian studied pictures of what New York was in 2009 when the story takes place and really captured certain iconic places, but not just here's the Empire State Building. It's no, here's Times Square, what it actually feels like to stand in Times Square. And here's what the Museum of Natural History, here's what it looks like to be in there. And there's a whole sequence when they're on the subway and there's no dialogue. It's just silent, but just seeing the stations go by the subway, you're looking out the windows oh yes, that's what that feels like. And be able to capture that in a comic is really interesting. So it's a lovely book, some beautiful sequences, and it's all colored in this mix of purple and peach inks, color. It's very minimal color. It's very stunning when you look at the page, and just, I was really impressed. I've already liked these creators. I like their work. And someone that, lived in New York in his early 20s, I could recognize parts of this story. And I think it's a reason it was so well celebrated when it came out, and it's worth your attention. Roaming, great book. I'm glad I picked up a copy.
I am glad you described it to me because I want to read it, but I feel like I want to read it in the way that Mike wants to read comic books, where I want it to fuck me up. I will get wrecked reading this. I grew up in the New York area. I was working in New York City, post 2008 recession after I graduated from college a few years into it. So you're describing you're the friendships and being in your early 20s in New York, and you said 2009 and I was oh
yep, you were there. Yeah, and again, I think what works about it, again, part of it is the story's relatable, but also just the way it's illustrated. There's so much happens without a lot of dialogue. There's sequences where they're just wandering through the city, and just illustrating it feel that way. There's a sequence where Danny and Zoe, they get stoned together and they start talking about a high school party, and you get to visualize their memory as they're talking about it. You know what I mean? It's like they're having the memory and their experience of being in New York at the same time is overlapped on each other. And just, it's a really thoughtfully done book. It's a very simple story, but the way it's told is so beautifully effective.
I'm sold.
I really got to read this. I've had a copy of this book sitting on my shelf for a minute. I picked it up. Man, when did this book come out? Because I feel like I'm going to be really ashamed if I remember when it came out.
2023. So it's less than
23. Okay.
Yeah.
This is
Mike.
a different. Okay, I'm thinking of a different Tamaki book. I can't remember which.
This one summer?
Which would. No, it's. I could. Anyways,
Okay.
I bought a copy of this book at Gosh Comics in the UK when I went there in 2017, and I've been sitting on it, and I just haven't read it.
Okay.
Mike, what have we said about books? They're like wine. You shelve them until the moment when you need them.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Anyways, nonetheless, I do have a copy of this book as well. I haven't read it. But Paul, thank you for bringing it and reminding me that it exists, because I always have a good time reading the Tamaki family books.
Yes, they're very good. At what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kara, let's kick things over to you. How have you been? How have comic books been? What gives you the right to talk about comic books by women? Okay.
Mike, I'm so glad you asked me, because actually I am a cisgender woman, and I was very keenly aware when I was getting into comics of who was a woman making comics. I know that I have talked at length about how important Gail Simone is to me. And that's because when I was starting to get into superhero comics, she was doing Birds of Prey, and I was like, oh, a lady making comics about ladies for ladies. And I think back to reading superhero comics as a teenager, and just how I won't get into it because we've gone into it before about how superhero comics are these very specific ideas of what men and women's bodies should look like, and none of them are realistic to men or to women. But as a teenage girl, you're already confronted with all these images of how women should look, and this was the mid 2000s for me. So just think everything is low rise, and you need flat abs and the thigh gap and all that toxic stuff. And then you open a superhero comic and they're showing you Starfire, who has an E cup and no waist to speak of. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror and trying to make my body look more like hers, and that was really fucked up. So anyway, so it's important to have a variety of different creators, so that not every single experience is going through the lens of straight white dude lens, which is fine to an extent. But if every single story is through that lens, that's creating a very warped view of the world. So anyway, so I am qualified to talk about women in comics because
no shit.
I think because I have try to pay attention to it. I was looking at our Goodreads topic for the March reading challenge, and in the community, somebody linked to a list of comics and graphic novels by women. I think based by votes in Goodreads, and going through the list, most of them I was kind of I know them. I read that. I know that. I read them. There were a few surprises, but mostly it's okay, you have all the Raina Telgemeier books, and you have G. Willow Wilson and Kelly Sue DeConnick and Gail Simone and the Tamakis, and there's some manga creators. It's actually kind of interesting looking at this list, because there were some surprises that I want to look at. I was delighted to see a Lucy Nisley book on there. The first one is Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, but there's also stuff like Hark a Vagrant, Kate Beaton stuff, and Hyperbole and a Half, and things that I would consider more like cartoons or webcomics as opposed to comic books. So it was interesting to see what was on that list. So in looking at this list and deciding what to read, there was so much that I had already read, where I was kind of feeling are women not allowed to make comics anymore or something? Like, what's going on? But I think
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really think that there's like, this is like part of a bigger problem of like,
it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like something gets popular, and that is the one comic that you should read.
Right. When you reach out to a group of people who are comic book readers, you go, oh, can I, do you have any recommendations of comics by women? People just go, oh, read Smile. And it's like,
yeah,
I swear to God, people have been recommending me Smile for 15 fucking years. And I'm like, can we get something new?
Yeah.
Please, God, there has to be something new that is also good. I know that it's out there. It's so frustrating. I feel your frustration. And I just like, I don't know. Maybe we're longtime comic book readers, but I'm like, motherfucker, I'm deep in this shit. You do not have to pitch me the thing that Barnes and Noble can also pitch me, right? Anyways.
So I started looking on my beloved app Hoopla, may it never die, to see if there were any of these books that I was less familiar with available. And the answer is no. But in doing my little keyword searches, I stumbled upon a book that is by a woman, is not on this list, and is super cute. So today, I am delighted to share with you the adorable emotional fraughtness that is Pilu of the Woods by Mai K. Nguyen. And this is definitely a book that you can tell is geared towards a younger audience, but I still think I can put the all ages label on it very confidently, because while reading it, when you're reading a comic that's like specifically targeted as kids, and you can tell within a few pages whether it's like, oh, this is for children, there is nothing for me here to keep me like interested, or you're like, this is all ages, there's enough here that's of like plot or emotional or character complexity to keep me as an adult reader engaged. This is the latter. So Pilu of the Woods is about this little girl named Willow who is having, like, you meet her, she's having a tough time in school. She's being bullied a little bit. She's crying in the bathroom. She is having tension with her older sister. So a few pages in, I was just like, is this Lilo and Stitch all over again? Is this Lilo and Nani? No, it's not. So Willow and her family live close to the woods and like going into the woods. So she's mad. So she takes their cute little dog out for a walk in the woods to like be in her feelings. And she runs into a forest spirit that looks like a little girl around her age, but her hair is made of leaves and it's very cute.
Hell yes.
And so they're like talking about their like family dynamic angst, and they're coming at it from two different directions. So like Willow is upset. This is a spoiler, but it's not really a spoiler, because if you're an adult reading this and you've read stories before, you'll pick up really quickly that Willow's mom is dead. And so Willow's mom is dead, and so she's feeling a lot of guilt about that because she like yelled at her mom before her mom died.
Oh fuck.
And her little forest spirit companion friend, new friend, is Pilu, and Pilu ran away from home because she's feeling lonely and like nobody's listening to her. She comes from a big family of saplings, and Mama Tree doesn't have time to pay attention to all the little saplings.
Kara, shut up. You can't tell me more about this book. I'm going to cry.
I'm telling you. So like all of my comments about this book are like, why am I crying over this children's book? But again, all ages, because who hasn't experienced feeling weird in your family dynamic, feeling lost, being bereft at the death of a loved one, and feeling lots of different types of ways about how you're processing that. And so throughout the book, this has a really gorgeous color palette. It sounds kind of similar to what Paul was describing, where there's like only a couple different colors. They're a little more muted. So the colors in this are more like greens and browns and these very soft earth tones to pull you into this. I think it's supposed to be like a Pacific Northwest kind of vibe. And like through the margins of this story, you're seeing these little like squidgy amoeba monster things that look kind of like amoebas and kind of like axolotls. And sometimes they're in jars and sometimes they're in this seething ocean, but they're like physical representations of Willow's emotions. And she's describing to Pilu how she's like literally bottling them up because she doesn't want them to overwhelm her. So this book is about two little girls who meet in the woods, but it's really about like, hey, you can feel your feelings. You should acknowledge and feel your feelings, because if you keep them bottled up, then they will turn into giant monsters in the woods and try to absorb your friend that you just made. So it's very a lot. Mike is holding his head in his hands.
How much did this book cost? Because I've been paying a therapist for 5 years.
So, and like, but watching them talk through their differences and how they might be like jealous of one another, or like trying to like push each other towards these different conclusions based on their own experiences. Kind of like what Mike was just saying about like, why the hell am I paying a therapist? Like, this book is so like clear and sophisticated about how it's confronting how you should talk about emotions in a healthy way. And how like I was really struck by like how much crying is in this book. I was like, when the hell was the last time I saw a woman or like anybody cry in a comic book? I think it was Sailor Moon, because Sailor Moon is described as a crybaby. But I kind of feel like more comics should have crying, because like people cry. There is a lot to cry about these days, and we should be allowed to cry. But like make America cry again. So it's just, you know. It was really lovely. It had a really nice resolution that will fuck Mike up if he reads this. It really beautiful. And like, you know, I love it when comics teach you real world stuff. Like, I've learned so much weird fun facts from reading Archie comics when I was a kid. This book, because again, Willow's family is like involved in the forest, and like her dad's a professor. Like, so she's like walking through the woods with Pilu and just like dropping knowledge about mushrooms and flowers and just like random stuff they're passing that's like real facts. And I'm like, yes, I'm learning, I'm growing. And to top it all off, at the end of this book, there is a recipe for a dish that's mentioned in the book. And I got to that and I thought, wow, more comics should end in recipes. Let's make this a thing. Like, more crying, more recipes. Let's just like get in touch with our feelings and learn how to make healthy local food.
I mean, this sounds like a great way to like make 2025 better.
It was great. And you know, it's like it was like raining and I had a cup of tea and it was just like snuggled on my couch. It was a really, really great, like quiet, rainy morning book to read.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention so that it will break me very hard later. So it sounds great. It really,
You're welcome.
Even just the cover looks gorgeous. I mean, what a cute looking book.
It's so cute.
In like the nicest way possible. Like, I love the look of this book. You've completely sold me on this. I love it.
Okay. I'll expect a tears report later. I need to know exactly how much you cried and at what points, because there are quite a few different options. But anyways, Mike, how are you? How have comic books been? And why are you, as a man, qualified to talk about women comic creators?
Listen, I feel like I'm just going to copy exactly what Paul said, but like here is the thing. I was saying this before we started recording. I guess I can give a quick update. I've been good. I've been playing Pokemon Go like it's my job, to the point where I literally almost need to stop. Like, this upcoming week, I'm giving up. I have to stop everything. I need to like take a break and reset my brain, because it has been a long freaking week. The IRCB folks who got my email this week saw that my brain was basically like falling out of my skull. So outside of being just absolutely elated that the zine has been funded, Totally Not a Cult is actually going to come to life. I'm so excited. I did try to sit down and read some comics, and what's fucked up is that, you know, I read comic books. We get comps from a couple publishers, and we're very, very thankful for them, because I do try to like read through things to try to find something interesting so that I can recommend it to folks on the show. I pass that along to the folks who are also a part of the podcast to be like, hey, if you get a chance, take a look at these. Sometimes we bring them up, sometimes we don't. So thank you to the publishers who send us stuff. So this week, I knew that the theme was coming up, and I sat down and I was looking at all the comps that we got for this week's show, or this upcoming week of comics. And I realized that from all of the publishers that we got and all of the various random people who have sent us random or comic books for their Kickstarter, all this other stuff, we had 0 comic books by women. from Image Comics, from Titan Comics. Actually, Titan Comics, I can't really say. There are some people whose names I can't determine the gender of, so I can't really completely say. But like on the whole, it was not apparently obvious like that there were any comic books by women, which I'm like, damn. Image in particular is got a whole month or whole week of comics this week. 0 women creators on their books, or at least writer and artist, right? Maybe our colorists and stuff. I didn't really look through the whole list comprehensively, but still, the big
Read
names.
them to filth, Mike. Read them to filth. Drag Image through the mud. Do
all
better.
I'm saying is that like it's very interesting to see that the big names that like Image is throwing out for their books for this particular week, at least. No women. So very surprising, but I did dig into my pile of Silver Sprocket comics, because if there's one thing that Silver Sprocket does is, one, they publish fucking banger comics every single month. This pile of comics, there's at least 1 or 2 books where I'm like, hell yeah, dude. And fortunately, I had a couple of books in the backlog that I've seen a million times over and over, because they're not newer, but they've been republished by Silver Sprocket. And there was a series of volumes, I guess they're kind of smaller books, called Magical Beatdown by Jen Woodall, which is on the cover is like the most badass looking magical girl you've ever seen, right? She's in the uniform, but she's got a machete, right? And she's got like an eye patch because she's probably lost an eye from fighting. And you're like, hell yeah. I sat down on this series and I was blown away. There's a page that I clipped out of volume 3 where the 2 magical girls are working together, and their little magic that they're using to synergize, they have to say a phrase, and on behalf of love, justice, and just being done with this shit, ... They're like merging themselves together to kick these guys' asses. Because basically the story is, there's a young girl, her name is Fujiko, and she turns into a magical girl to kick the ever-living shit. And I mean, not just kick their ass, murder the asshole men who are trying to ruin her day. In the first story, she just wants to go. It's a very Sailor Moon type story. She just wants to go to the arcade, play her video game, and have a good time. What happens when she gets to the arcade? Well, a couple of guys come up to her and like, hey, honey, can we maybe get in next on this and maybe we can play our own little game? And she's like, I don't want to do this. And she turns into this magical girl and then chops them all up and kills them in a park. Why not? That's the end of the first issue. And I was like, holy shit, it's so violent. It's so bloody. The way that she uses like the risograph colors to go from every story that's about Fujiko is in blue. And then when she turns into the magical girl, it's this very vibrant pink. It's really, really cool. The second issue does the same kind of thing. She's walking through the park. She's changing her clothes in a locker, and she's got all these newspaper articles up about a mysterious magical girl who's been killing men in Tokyo. And so she runs into some guys because of course that's what happens in the story. She kills those guys. Same thing happens in the third one. And it's kind of this repetitive thing, but you can feel the influence of like Sailor Moon and all sorts of other stories that kind of play with those tropes. But Jen is just like, oh, go ahead.
It's your typical monster of the week cartoon, but the monster is men.
Exactly. I mean, like, the question at the center of the story is like, what happens when you actually piss off a magical girl? And the answer is you get fucking killed, right? I love that. These are 3 little comics that are out that have come out every couple of years. The first one's 24 pages, second one's 44, the next one's 56. They're a little expensive, but they're printed on risograph, so they're really nice to look at if you like the risograph style. I have the digital copies because I have the Silver Sprocket digital subscription, but man, like, you can see Woodall's art process get more refined as each issue goes on, because they're printed a couple of years apart. And holy smokes, the art style from volume 1 up to volume 3, you can tell she went from like pretty good artist to stunning, like majestic, understands line work and color and like page layout in a way that like there's just growth, and it's incredible. And I you know, it's funny, I've been following Jen Woodall on Instagram since I got on Instagram, I think. Because her account is called Funeral Beat, and I've always seen her art. I was like, oh, that's really cool looking stuff. Like, she's just always drawn really nice stuff. I didn't realize that when I got these books that it was the same person until I got to the end of the first volume, and they're like, oh, here's their Instagram. And I was like, that's fucking cool. Like, everything clicked into place. But yeah, had to dig through my Silver Sprocket archive of books that I haven't read yet, and I found these, and I was very pleased because they're just brutal. Like, I cannot explain how violent they are. They are super violent. do not go into this thinking, oh, I'm going to read a nice little Sailor Moon story with swords. It's like, no, you're going to read Kill Bill that features a magical girl. Like that's where we're at.
Right.
But it's really, really good. Super fun, fast reads. I can't recommend them enough if you're into that kind of stuff. It's so good.
It feels like there should be a Netflix animated miniseries, just like 6 episodes with some really tight, gruesome storytelling. I also realized while you were describing this book, Mike, that I think the common theme we accidentally hit upon for this show, besides female creators, is we all read and talked about a book with a very limited color palette.
Yeah.
Which I think is very fascinating.
Yeah. I here's the thing. I think there is something that can be uniquely done with a limited color palette. That may be a reason why we chose to do that with our zine.
I was going to say, not to continue the theme.
To self-plug on Maine. But at the same time, like, I think that you can do a lot with a little, right? And it is, I think, in some artists, I think, have said it's an interesting challenge. And not to say that I want to be like, I wanted to challenge these artists with something. It's more like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of really cool stuff that can be done with a very limited color palette. So, this book is it's very cool. It's genuinely just 2 colors or 3 colors, like white, blue, and pink. But like the blue and pink never intersect. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't know. You know that shit's about to get real when you turn the page and suddenly it's pink and you're like, uh-oh. After you read the first one, you kind of like feel the vibe for it. I like that.
I really like the idea of pink being a color that makes you go, uh-oh, though. Like, I really love that. Let's take our Barbie wardrobes from last year and turn it into something menacing.
Yeah. It's great. It's really, really good. But yeah, I can't recommend this enough. It was so much fun.
I know you've mentioned the Silver Sprocket like membership or Patreon, and I got to get on that. That sounds so cool. They publish so many great books, and
exactly. Yeah. It's $15 a month, which like I realize is not cheap, but like if you look at the price tag on the books, I've said this before, but even just buying digital, you're going to be paying more if you bought all the single books every month. Like the fact that this upcoming month I'm getting 4 books for $15. That's insane. That's easily $50 worth of comics for $15, right? I can't express how much of a deal that is, and they're all pretty good, right? It's rare that you're going to get some bad stuff. Anyways, Silver Sprocket, call me, please. I'd love to just find a reason to shill you for not just for
Silver
free.
Sprocket, put us on your comp list so we can have some goddamn women in our inboxes.
Yes, please. But all right, let's move on. Let's talk about comics on the top of our pile, whether they are new or old or something you're just trying to get off of your shelf. I want to shout out the folks that are hanging out with us on Discord today. We have a very big group today. I'm super pleased. Danny's going to be reading DC's X Sonic the Hedgehog #1. Okay. Jeff's going to be reading the remainder of Wicked and Divine in prep for the new Wickdiv Uncovered series that's coming out very, very soon. I think it'll be out this month, I should say. We'll be on Patreon this month. And then on the public feed shortly after. So if you got the Kickstarter for the Wickdiv cover book, it'll be perfectly in line. It's like we made a plan. CK is going to be reading the Power Fantasy Volume 1. I'm super hyped for that. Paul G is going to be reading Crumble by Meredith McLaren and Andrea Bell, which I need to get my copy of. Hugh is reading Saga number 72 because Hugh and I are the only people reading Saga still. And Peyton is going to be reading Wonder Woman Earth 1. So super excited to hear what you guys think of those books after you finish them. I know that a couple of those are also on my to-read pile as well. But let me kick things over to
me.
Kara. What is on the top of your pile this week?
So continuity for listeners. We recently talked about a bunch of Ryan North books, Ryan North, Erica Henderson, and I basically spent that whole episode adding books to my to be read pile. And the library had a copy of Danger and Other Unknown Risks that I haven't read yet, even though it's been on my pile basically since it was hitting the monthly comic stands. And I just never got around to it, but it's time for this bottle of wine to be opened. It's rosé season now. I'm ready for a funny. So I don't know anything about this book except the fact that it's this creative team and the cover has a human character holding an enormous bear and running away with it. And that's all I need to know. I need no further information. I'm not going to look up any spoilers. I'm just going to go in. And then second book, also from a recent episode of this show that I've added to my list, is the Batman Cult miniseries that Paul talked about a while ago, which I also haven't read, but Cult and Batman in the same title makes me feel good about this choice. And I trust Paul when it comes to Batman, and I trust the fact that Mike is making like punching in the air motions at every single thing I'm mentioning. So I feel like I've chosen well this week. Thank you.
It's funny. I saw that on your list. I was like, actually, Mike is the better salesman for that book. I think Mike likes that book more than I do. So yeah.
Listen, that book, my mind was just exploded in a million directions. I didn't realize that there were other really good Batman books from the 80s that were like that. Yeah, I just genuinely impressed by how solid that book was from start to finish and how much I liked it. Because I feel like, I don't know, it's hard for me to get sucked into old 80s comics in general, but that book from start to finish is just awesome. And you chose Danger and Other Unknown Risks, maybe the funniest book that I read from 2023. I think that's when it came out. Ryan North, we all know he's a fantastic comedy writer. And this book is him just like, or 2024, I think. I guess he won for, I don't know, whenever it came out. I read it like as soon as it came out, and I had so much fun with it. He is so, like, he's just into his own bullshit, and it doesn't have to be in a property, right? Like, he did this with Squirrel Girl, where he's got the little notes everywhere. Did it with Archie or with Jughead or wherever he wrote. Jughead. You know, it was very fun. But him doing his own thing, and then Erica Henderson, you know, the co-worker on Squirrel Girl, like, it is a match made in heaven, and I just wish they would just do like a book like this every year. It's so good. To the point where I gave this to my nephew, and then he texted me on his plane ride, or after he got off the plane, and he was like, "Uncle Mike, that was a really funny comic book. I liked it. Is there more?" And I was like, "That's it, dude. I'm so sorry, dude. It's done."
Time to hand him Squirrel Girl.
I did explain to him that it was like a movie, right? It's a movie that you watch once, you know, and you can go back and rewatch it. And he got it. I think he understood that analogy. But anyway, I hope you're gonna have so much fun with both those books, Karen. I'm so excited for you. Oh my gosh.
So what do you think? Is Danger and Other Unknown Risks a nice crisp rosé, and Batman the Cult is more like a dry Malbec? Is that what we're going for here?
I don't.
Sure.
Wine, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's all the same.
Thank you. All right, go on as you were.
Paul, what's on the top of your file?
Well, I realize I haven't been on the show for a couple weeks. I'm still continuing my Fantastic Four journey. I've had to set aside the Fantastic Four for a little while to read some other stuff for the show and for other reasons. But I think the next issue I have is issue 19. So I'm chugging along through the Jack Kirby and Stan Lee Fantastic Four books.
Hell yeah.
Very uneven, but when it hits, it hits. So
okay,
I'll just say so far the highlight was issue 13. The Fantastic Four versus the Red Ghost and his indescribable super apes. That book was awesome. First appearance of the Watcher. Great book. Anyway. Cool. In terms of other comics, I picked this up because it caught my eye, and it is a one-shot from IDW called Godzilla versus America, Chicago. So I guess IDW has the Godzilla license. They're doing these one-shot anthology books where Godzilla is attacking different cities in America. First one is in Chicago. And I don't really care about Godzilla that much, and I don't really read licensed comics just in general. But what I really like is that IDW is willing to take licensed properties and give them to interesting creators and not expect it to just be the cash in. You know what I mean? We saw that with Transformers versus G.I. Joes. I talked about the other Tom Scioli Godzilla book a couple weeks ago. They did Godzilla Monster Piece Theater, which is one of the wildest comics I've read in a long time. But here we get an anthology. So we have a list of creators. We have Mike Costa and Ryan Brown doing a story together. Ezra C. Daniels does a story. Tim Seeley has a story in here. And the reason I picked it up, Caroline Cash, of course, the creator behind the Eisner Award-winning Pee Pee Poo Poo comics, is doing a Godzilla comic and bought on site. Yeah. So it looks like fun.
I'm so mad that I did not pick up a copy of this from a shop. And I think these are all Chicago-based creators too. Yeah. I think that is also like the tie-in for all of these people, is that they all live in Chicago or have lived in Chicago.
My question for Paul after you read this, because this is the only thing I can think about, because I've learned now that that my comic book job is ruining it for everybody. Why? How does Godzilla get to Chicago. Chicago is not on an ocean. Do not talk to me about the Great Lakes. They're not the ocean, which is Godzilla's primary mode of transportation. I want to know, how is Godzilla getting to Chicago? Tell me. Tell me what comic book logic they use to explain this once you've read this, Paul, please.
Oh, yeah,
That's all I want to know.
I'll report back. It might not be a satisfying answer, but I will have an answer for you at some point. So
I really want like underground tunnels. Like Godzilla has like an underground water network that connects from the ocean to the Great Lakes. Some weird shit like that. Teleportation. Going through the magma in the center of the earth. Anything to explain how this could happen.
Northwest Passage, that's not a thing? That doesn't work? I mean, that's a thing, right?
Well,
Godzilla 1805.
Right. There's probably going to be some ridiculous thing where the ocean is somehow connected to Lake Michigan. I'm sure that's what it is.
They'll figure it out.
Listen, I would hope that Ryan Brown would be able to hopefully come up with something. Of all the creators on that list, they would be able to come up with something that is absurd and very funny and would totally work. So let us know how it goes, Paul. But let me wrap us up here on my end with a book that I'm reading next, which is Saint for Rent, Volume 1 and 2. This is by Ru Zhu. This is a comic book that I've been sitting on for a long time, and as I've been slowly but surely trying to actually go through and read all of my Kickstarter books on and off for the past 2 years. Like, this book came up, I backed it because it was because I read that series Let's Play on Webtoon, and then I backed the Kickstarter, which means that I got put on the forever email list of every time this company who published the Let's Play physical editions, they always message you directly on Kickstarter with an update to be like, hey, we've got a new Kickstarter, and it's been 3 years, and they've been sending me messages for 3 years. I had to finally stop that a few months ago, but this one I did get I was interested in because it's a story about a person named Saint who runs an inn for time travelers, which leaves him in little time to write his trashy novels. He has like a pit stop between crisscrossing lives of his out-of-date friends and family. He wonders where his place is in the world that is quickly passing by. It's a very interesting idea. It's got like slice of life vibes, sci-fi, kind of like teenager plus storytelling, which is 90% of webtoons. But I don't know. This is a webtoon series that they collected into some collections. I got the digital edition, and I was looking through it, and I remembered why I backed it. And it's because the cover looks like a manga. It looks like your standard manga cover, but the inside of this book has one of the most interesting color palettes I've seen in a comic in a really long time. Like, lots of heavy blues and blacks and browns, and like instead of using black lines for outlines, everything's outlined in white. It's really unique. And I really just need to sit down and read this. It seems like it's a slow paced book, like it's very chill on the whole from the few pages that I skimmed through. So I'm like, it's got time traveling, which I'm always interested in reading how people do things, especially long running series. Like, I think Saint for Rent is still ongoing. And so if they're doing time travel, that means they've got to be doing something interesting. And even if it's ridiculous and shticky, like Steins Gate, for those of you who know what that is, I'm here for it because I find that stuff to be very funny and interesting. But it's got this slice of life stuff. There's probably some romance about a time traveling person that they can't be with, which come on, who doesn't love a good yearning story, right? So I'm here to just check it out, see what it's like. And if I like the first 2 volumes, I'll probably go try to find the rest of them. But yeah, this looks really nice and cozy also. Like, there's a coziness to it that the first chapter that I started to read through kind of had that all throughout. So looking forward to reading this. Saint for Rent looks nice and fun. And I think you can read it all online for free too. So check it out at saintforrent.com, I think is the website.
You had me at yearning.
Yeah. I'm guessing. I don't know. Maybe there is, there's this person likes to write trashy romance novels, which means naturally at some point in the story, they have to get into a romantic situation that kind of is a parallel to the trashy romance that they're writing, right? That's just
Mike,
a natural
you've read a book
thing.
Before.
I have. I read like 4 books before, okay? It's so funny. I have to go on a tangent now because you've brought this to my mind again. I was talking to somebody about how, like, I feel really sometimes, and this is all just Mike bullshit, of course, so you have to just appreciate that for a second. But I was talking to somebody how it's like, oh, well, I talk to a lot of my friends and they all read a lot of prose novels, and I feel really like out of the loop because I'm like, I don't read any of these fucking books. I don't got time to sit down and read prose. But I when we start to talk about themes of things, I'm like, oh, no. I have experienced the gamut of all of these themes. I've experienced probably more than you fucking could even fathom, because I read so many different types of comic books, and it's all prose, it's all fiction, it's all using the same stuff. It's just like, there is this, oh, you don't understand, you don't read prose books kind of thing that I get from people sometimes, where I'm just like, motherfucker, you don't understand how much fiction I read. I think you underestimate the value of comic books here. And then I have to get up on my, this is actual literature, like soapbox, and make someone feel bad that they made me feel inferior. But yeah, it's a whole thing.
Good for you for getting up on that soapbox. And I have a prose recommendation for you that is short and is related to the book that you read for this week.
Is it on Tyranny? Oh, it's a different book. Okay, never mind.
May I recommend for you, Mike, A Magical Girl Retires, which is a short book about a girl, a woman in her 30s, I think, who gets a job as a magical girl, and they're trying to stop like the global warming crisis, essentially. And then like the ultimate magical girl awakens, comes into her power, and is like, oh, I'm going to accelerate this because I think humans are trash and they should all die so that the planet can be saved.
Sure.
I'm in. I'm in.
And I'm like, yeah, that's a spoiler for halfway through the book, but also like, that's how I'm going to sell it to Mike. It's like less than 200 pages. I think it's like 120 pages. A magical girl retires. It's
so funny. There is a manga series that I read called Ron in the Gray World. This is a series recommended by April Malik, who we used to work with over at Comixology. And it's such a weird little book that, for some reason, when you described this, A Magical Girl Retires, it's got the same vibe where like, the main character, Ron, is this little girl who gets these magical shoes, if I'm not mistaken, that turn her into a full-size adult, right? Nice. And then she gets to go and experience the world and everything. Have you read this series? It's
Shazam. You're describing Captain Marvel, but not the Marvel version.
Right. But her mother, who she doesn't keep in contact with because her mom's in this other dimension where super magical beings go away, is like a retired like witch, essentially. And then so her whole job is to sit on top of this humongous magical door that keeps all of the evil out of the world. And then she basically, through a series of bits and pieces in the story, she ends up like coming back to see her daughter for a moment. She's like, don't worry, all of my girls that I left in heaven, or wherever the hell it was called, like they're going to watch the door. I just have to be back in like 24 hours. And then, the things go wrong. Chaos ensues. But it's, for some reason, that all reminded me of the same thing. And then she just very easily, as this woman who's retired, just like, oh, all of the evil has come back. Well, of course I can just fix this. And then she just does. Like, it's so absurd because it's done as a bit. I don't know. It's very fun. So if you haven't read Ron in the Gray World, it's a very fun, like 7 volume series. It's pretty short. I don't know. Get into manga, Paul. Finally, let's get you in. That's the goal of 2025. How do we get Paul reading a manga or into a manga?
Get Paul to read a manga.
Yeah. Let's see. There was a period a couple years ago when I read the first maybe 2 volumes of I'm Sorry, Dentist Is Touching Me. Is that was that what that one was called? There's one I was reading a manga about Excuse Me, Dentist, It's Touching Me, about these 2 rival Yakuza leaders, and one of them goes to a dentist, but it turns out the dentist is basically trans, and he doesn't realize that. The leader of the other gang had transitioned, but no one knew. It's fucking weird. But I read it because it's Amelia Perez. That's right. It was a musical manga. It was very strange. No, I read it because it was called Excuse Me, Dentist, It's Touching Me, and then I stopped reading it because it's called Excuse Me, Dentist, It's Touching Me.
Oh, man. I see. Paul, has anyone shoved One Punch Man down your throat yet?
No, here's the thing. I think we got to get Paul in on like a sports manga. Weirdly, there are some very good baseball manga that I think you would dig. Or you could read the classic that everybody says is top tier, doesn't matter who you are, and that is Initial D, which is a racing manga about like racing sports, or like Subarus and stuff like that through the streets of Japan. Nice. It's supposed to be very, very good.
Look at that.
We'll
Recommendations all over the place, like
Anyways,
bonus recommendation episode.
Listen, all day. Listen, if you let us just keep talking, I'll just keep throwing comic books at people until we find something that hits. I do this at parties, and I think it makes people dislike me. So,
Mike, super fun at parties. Can come to Galentine's Day.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this has been really, really fun. I think this is where we should probably wrap up the show. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate, again, everybody who has supported the zine. If you haven't and you're interested and you just want to get like a digital copy, head to ircb.fyi/zine. If you do that, you also get a backlog of all of the previous zines that we did. And it's like almost 100 pages worth of zine content. It's really, really good stuff. Collages by Paul, illustrations by our one and only Danny, bunch of written essays by Paul and Kara and Brian and Kait, and you get to see me blathering at the front and back of each of these things. It's really, really fun. So yeah, head over to ircb.fyi/zine. Otherwise, thank you all for listening live. If you're on Discord, if you're listening to this right now, thank you. You're a fantastic human being. Thank you to Paul and Kara for your time today. Thank you to Kait for proof listening this episode. Thank you to Zander for editing. And as always, as we say on every episode of I Read Comic Books, you got to remember, comics are good, and so are you.